Artaxias I, king of Armenia, known as Artashes in Armenian, is definitely one of the most famous Armenian monarchs. His influence is so great that he can even cause video game developers to include him as the leader of Armenia generations prior to his historical birth. But just who exactly was this legendary ruler? Artashes I, or Artaxias, as he is known in the Greek sources, was king of Armenia from approximately 190 or 189 to 160 BC. While he is recognized as one of the greatest kings of Armenia by Armenians who had an incredibly important role, as the one who truly consolidated Armenia and cemented its status as a regional kingdom, to outside sources he seems to be relegated to his status as the founder of a new dynasty, a usurper of sorts who did end up founding a great new capital of international renown, Artashat, known as artaxata in Greek and Roman sources. The real Artashes I is definitely more than a typical usurper. Let's go over the details of what we know about the life of this remarkable ruler. According to Hellenistic sources, Artashes I was a Seleucid strategos who usurped power from the reigning Yervanduni, or Orontid, dynasty, and eventually rebelled to create his own independent kingdom. Now we take strategos to mean general, but at this time in Hellenistic history it also had the connotation of governor, or military governor, to be more precise. This is similar to the phenomenon of the Shakanaku kings of Mari following the collapse of the Sargonic Akkadian Empire. The Sargonic kings had placed Shakanakus, which means generals in Akkadian, in power in the city of Mari after they had conquered it. And after the empire collapsed, the Shakanakus retained their power as independent kings. Now I have to stress that it is not possible to take any ancient sources as the gospel truth, though it is a possibility that Artashes was a strategos of the Seleucid Empire who was able to overthrow the Yervanduni kingdom of Armenia and eventually rebel and establish his own dynasty as kings. The texts of Artashes himself seem to tell a bit of a different story. There aren't too many texts from the Yervanduni and Artashesian dynasties, from approximately the 6th to 1st centuries BC. But the boundary stones of Artashes are some of the most important. As we will see, they not only provide important info about Artashes from their textual content, but their very existence seems to verify some details about Artashes recorded in the much later history of Armenia by Moses Chorenatsi, Moses of Choren. In the short texts on the stones, Artashes identifies himself as a Yervanduni dynast, which seems to indicate that he was not an outsider as the Hellenistic sources seem to suggest. His name, Artashes, the Armenian version of the Old Persian name Artaxerxes, Artaxias, also seems to indicate a Yervanduni connection. The Yervanduni dynasty claimed to be related to the Achaemenid dynasty, and the regnal name of Artashes, Artaxerxes, does perhaps imply an Achaemenid connection as well. Now let's talk about the Armenian sources in more depth. Of course, we have to note that the Armenian sources for the reign of Artashes, that is, the sources written in Armenian, come from at least the 5th century AD. This, of course, means that all of it must be taken with a grain of salt, but this does not completely discredit the historical memory of the Armenian tradition. There are, of course, fantastic stories about Artashes repulsing an invasion of nomadic Alans and capturing an Alan princess and making her his queen by roping her from across the Kura River, but there are some details that perhaps have some more academic significance. Artashes is credited with expanding the boundaries of the kingdom, something the Armenian sources share with the Hellenistic ones, consolidating his power, and cultivating the land. The famous boundary stones of Artashes seem to be directly connected to this narrative. Armenia during the Yervanduni dynasty was a powerful kingdom that was able to exert political and military authority over its neighbors, but it was in essence a local power due to its tribal nature. When Xenophon traveled through Armenia through the Achaemenid period, he traveled through the Yervanduni-controlled satrapy essentially. Something that is striking about Xenophon is that he talks about several tribes he encountered along the way without necessarily identifying them particularly as Armenians, though of course he does use the term Armenians a few times and Armenia several times. This speaks to the lack of political unity in the realm, and a very decentralized policy by the Yervanduni satraps and subsequent monarchs. Artashes, through his actions, seems to have begun the transition of Armenia from being a tribal, local kingdom to a more centralized regional power, with clearly defined provinces and boundaries, which was all facilitated by the establishment of concrete boundaries and a large, fortified urban royal capital, Artashat. If this narrative is the correct one, then the importance of the reign of Artaxes I cannot be overstated. If Armenia remained a local power under the Yervanduni dynasty, it is possible that the concept of Armenia and being Armenian itself may have been lost if it had been completely subdued by a foreign imperial power like the Seleucid or Parthian empires. The fact that the kingdom was able to remain an important power in the political sphere despite its difficult position for the next several centuries, even establishing its own socio-political culture that has lasted continuously to this day despite several conquests of Armenia by various political powers, all of this can perhaps be credited to the remarkable rule of Artaxes I. I'll leave you with a passage about the reign of Artaxes I from Movses Khorenatsi. After all these noble deeds and acts of wise government, Artaxes ordered the boundaries of villages and of estates to be distinguished, for he had increased the population of Armenia by introducing many foreigners into the populace and settling them in the mountains and valleys and plains. And he established markers for the borders in the following way. He ordered 4-sided stones to be hewn, their centers to be hollowed out like plates, and that they be buried in the earth. Over them he had fitted 4-sided obelisks, a little higher than the ground. Of this, Ardashir, son of Sasan, was jealous, and he ordered the same to be done in Persia, and that they be called by his own name, so that the name of Artaxes might be no more remembered. But it is said that in the time of Artaxes there was no land unworked in Armenia, neither of mountain nor plain, on account of the prosperity of the country. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy videos about history, and the connection between history and media, Middle Eastern history, ancient Near Eastern history, Sumerians, Armenians, Mesopotamians in general, Hittites. Consider subscribing to the channel, consider liking this video, and of course I will see you in the next one later.